As we've said before, I've met, I think, most of you. My name is Eva Lineberry, and I am with Downtown Dallas Parks Conservancy. And we're doing a workshop series this spring to kind of tackle some different areas and just ramp up our knowledge on all of these things, answer any questions that y'all have. And today we are focusing on trimming and pruning. Okay, so trimming and pruning. Oftentimes we use these phrases kind of interchangeably. We just think they're the same thing, but they are slightly different. Trimming is oftentimes, we're gonna be doing that for like aesthetics. It's because we want it to look a certain way, we want it to be shaped a certain way. It's mostly for us. Pruning is more to do with the health of the plant. So if you've got diseases or you've got something that's broken off, pruning is what's needed when there's a problem with that plant and we're trying to remediate it. So just a heads up on a little difference of terminology there. All right, tools. Y'all are all familiar with these, I'm sure. Hedgers, string trimmers, and hand pruners. So there's different types of plants that we're gonna use, or that we're gonna use these on. The hedgers, I know, are very common. It's very common to use hedgers on shrubs. I'm going to make the case today for hand pruning on a lot of these. Hedgers are typically used on specific shrubs, namely boxwoods, hollies, things that can handle being hedged. But most of the shrubs that we've got out at these parks do not like being hit with a hedger. They are going to strongly prefer a hand prune. And the benefit of doing the hand pruners is that when we trim with the hand pruners, we only need to do it maybe twice a year. So as opposed to using a hedger where we have to come out there every couple weeks and trim off all the little arms that are coming up, the hand pruners are going to allow for a more natural look of the shrub. It's going to work better with the shrub itself. And then the string trimmers, I know typically that's just easier to use those on like grasses, right? When we have the tall grasses and we need to trim those back, the string trimmers do a pretty good job of that. We are going to be trimming some grasses today, and we will go over that. But okay, we're going to talk about a few different types of plants. So the first category is the palms, yuccas, and agaves. We don't have tons of them, but we do have them out at these parks. And for the most part, they don't need a lot of trimming, but can anybody tell me what these are? Does anybody recognize any of these? These are all in our parks. Which one is the palm? Yep, and then the yucca. Yep, and then we've got our agave in the middle. Right, so same category, but slightly different. So our palms and yuccas need trimming very similar in a very similar fashion. So they are both evergreen. So obviously we do not need to be cutting any of these back all the way. And as y'all have probably seen, these guys, they grow. The new growth is going to come here out of the middle. Right? It doesn't grow off the sides. It comes out the middle and then it kind of falls out. Y'all familiar with that? You see all that new growth that comes out of the middle. Once the leaves are older, they're at the bottom and they start to die off. That's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with the plant. That's just a very common way that they are growing. And so yeah, they come out of the middle and then they die off. So really the only trimming associated with these guys is just cleaning up the bottoms, right? We just need to clean up those bottom parts, take those off, whether it's cutting, sometimes they just fall right off. And it's kind of the same thing with the palms. They're all gonna come out of that middle. And then sometimes we get some die off. It's normal, it's fine. And we just need to cut those off. But things we are not gonna do, even if there's damage on the leaf itself, never cut the leaf like straight down the middle. So we're never gonna make a cut like right here. Even if there's damage on the end, it's not gonna heal, so we just have to wait for those to eventually die off down at the bottom. So the only trimming we need to do is on this dead stuff. Never make a cut on any of the leaves themselves. Okay, and these are a few, I'm just gonna give some examples of ones that are actually in the parks. Dwarf palmettos, we have a lot of those. There are so many of them, so typically they don't really need anything. You don't need to cut them, you don't need to trim them, unless there is something dead on it, they are happy to just be left alone. So no need to really do anything there. Twist leaf yucca and pale leaf yucca, this one is actually at Harwood. And same thing, you see there's a little bit of dead under here, so we just need to clean that up, but nothing, not a lot. And then if you can kind of see here, I don't know if y'all can see that, but how there's a little bit of a dead spot on the end of that leaf, we just need to leave that there. Don't cut it off because it'll actually damage the rest of the leaf also. So just leave it there. These plants, the one thing about this whole category of plants, they're actually very sensitive. So if they do have a cut on the leaf or they get hit with a string trimmer, unfortunately they don't heal. That leaf will not heal over. It's just gonna have a scar. So just, bear that in mind as you're going through and taking care of them. They're kind of sensitive. Similar with agaves. So these agaves are in downtown. They're not at our parks. These are actually at the Bank of America Tower. But similarly, they have new growth that comes right up the middle, and then the old ones will die off down at the bottom. So for example here, like if you see this dead at the bottom, those can be pulled out and cut. If they need to be actually cut, you can kind of tell here. This is a cut that was made probably from some damaged ones. But those, remember, do not heal. Those are not going to regrow from that same area. They only get new growth out of the middle. So just bear that in mind. Don't ever take a string trimmer anywhere near an agave because it will scar it and it will damage it permanently. So just be very, very careful. The same way that these are very pokey and will hurt you, we come in and we also accidentally hurt them and accidentally scar them pretty badly, as you can kind of see here. Yep, that guy. That scar, that's not going to go away. But again, you don't need to make any cuts. Don't cut here. I know it's kind of tempting, but don't do it. Just leave it be. If it's something really bad, if you're like, ooh, this leaf looks really ugly, just cut it all the way back. Just, you can make a cut where you take the entire leaf off, but don't ever make a cut in the middle of the leaf itself.
Those huge plants of agave, they die too?
Yes, so this one, they're called century plants, so they do have a lifespan. So
because when they bloom on the,
yeah, and they get those really tall blooms. Yes. Uh-huh.
This two of them over dealership.
Okay.
And I see that they're blooming and then now they die.
Yes, and that's their lifespan. So they bloom right before they die. That's how those plants work. So if you ever see an agave, it's going to have a big stalk coming out of the middle and then this kind of goofy flower at the top. That's natural for them. They only bloom one time in their whole life, and after they bloom, they die. So it's good to know, especially for managers, supervisors, if you start seeing agaves blooming, that's a good note that you're going to need to replace it the next year. Because that means it is done. So yeah, they go out with a bang. Any other questions about agaves? Feel good with agaves?
I have a question there.
Yeah.
How often should you remove pups?
Ooh, thank you. I did have a thing on pups. Okay. So pups. Have y'all seen little baby agaves coming out the side of the big agave? Some varieties have that, especially like agave Americana. They're going to have those little babies that come out the sides. Those aren't hurting the plant, but we typically remove them. They can be removed with the entire root in place, and they can actually be replanted. So if there's some other areas of the park where we're looking to fill in with other agaves, those are free plants. You can just plant the entire thing. And I do recommend removing the pups, or else they kind of just create this big grove of agaves. And typically for most park settings, that's not what we're looking for. This variety does not pup as much. This is the whale's tongue agave, which we'll look at in a second. I think I've got it on the next slide. Yeah. So Maximiliana is what we've got over in West End. These ones do get pups, which y'all have probably seen. And you can just remove them. If you want to replant them, you can. If you want to throw them away, that's fine. But if you've got somewhere to put one, I would say just replant it. The whale's tongue is another great variety that we use here. These ones, have y'all seen, there's like a lot of blue agaves. There's the Americanas, which are very common. This one is like it's a Perrii, it's agave Perrii. And they're actually different. There's so many different ones and they all kind of look the same, but they are different. The Americanas, when we get these big freezes, they oftentimes don't make it. So I've stopped planting those altogether. I really only plant this variety because it's hardy to like -30 degrees. So they're fine. They don't even need to be covered. And they get about that same size. Well, Americanas get bigger. They get about like 3 feet. So it's a good size. And then not to be confusing, but the red yucca, which is actually not a yucca. It's actually an agave. I don't know why it's called a yucca. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. But we do have quite a few of these in the park. They do not need to be trimmed. I have seen, not here, none of y'all are guilty of this, but in other places, I have seen people try to trim them and do this. Please don't do this. We do not need red yuccas looking like a ball. So just leave them be. They really don't need a whole lot. Sometimes, again, they get some dead at the bottom. You can clean that out, but otherwise, you do not need to touch them. And these ones are different with the blooming. They're going to bloom every year. So that one does not die after it blooms. This one is just going to have a lot of blooms every year. Hummingbirds love it. Super easy plant when we have quite a few of them. Okay, grasses and sedges. We have a lot of these in the parks. Well, real quick, grasses versus sedges. Let's go over that. So grasses, they're similar. Let me just say that. They are very similar. They are treated a little differently though. So grasses are kind of like the tall ones that we have in a lot of the parks like West End and Carpenter and here at Harwood. The tall ones, you know, there's a bunch of different varieties. Sometimes they've got blooms on them like this Gulf Muley. Those are grasses. The little guys, the ones that are like this big and kind of little tufts, those are the sedges. And so they are different. We won't get into all the, it doesn't matter. Short ones are usually sedges. Have edges. Yes, the sedges have edges. You can start to tell the difference between the two. But with grasses, okay, late winter, early spring. So right around now, y'all have been out trimming the grasses. I've seen at most of the parks. Y'all have already knocked out most of them. Carpenter, at my request, was the last one that we need to knock out. We're kind of hitting the last acceptable time to start trimming the grasses. Because this is actually, I took this at at Carpenter. So once they start getting this green coming out of the middle, that's great. That's what we want to see. But if we have that coming in through here, we just need to make sure we're not accidentally trimming the green off. So we do need to leave enough room, like this one is perfect. You obviously do not cut it all the way back at the ground. You leave about 8 to 12 inches, depending on the plant. Mexican feathergrass is a short one though. You know, we have quite a bit Mexican feathergrass. You can just leave probably 4 to 5 inches on those. And then, yeah, in terms of hand prune versus string trimmers, I don't really care as long as we don't accidentally go too low, right? Like if you feel confident using the string trimmer and you can leave a good chunk, great. Just don't accidentally go too low and cut it at the ground. If you don't feel confident doing that, just use some hand pruners. And then obviously just raking all of that out. The reason we do not want to do this too early, you'll see some people, like not in the parks necessarily, but you'll see it out. People will do this in like November, December. We don't want to do that because it really kind of destroys all the benefits of having these guys, like for overwintering bugs and animals and birds. They use this stuff as their home, and that's how they stay warm in the winter. And we like having those things in our parks. They make it so we don't have to do as much work later on. So go ahead and leave them up until right about now. Okay, division. Sometimes, there we go. Sometimes this happens where you get some dead in the middle. Oftentimes that is a watering issue. If there's too much water hitting right in the middle, it rots out. So that's a different discussion. But if we do start seeing this, or any other die off, if the grasses aren't looking so hot, what we can do is divide them. So what that means is you dig up the entire thing, and then you break off the parts that are still healthy, and you can replant those as individual plants. So that'll solve most of your problems right there. Sometimes this just happens with age once they've gotten too big and they're too old. And it can just be a natural thing that happens to grasses. So in order to not lose them completely, it is best to just go ahead and divide them. Just note, you do not like do like a chunk, like you don't dig it from the top and dig a chunk out, you have to dig up the entire thing and then break off pieces. Okay, so don't try to do a, a chunk to try to get it out. Just dig up the whole thing, break off the clumps. All right, these are the most, well, we actually have a lot in parks, but here's a few of the common ones. We've got Mexican feathergrass. Y'all recognize where this is. We're about to be there later today. Those ones, yeah, you can trim them back. And honestly, sometimes I don't trim them back. Sometimes I do. The plant does not need it. It's mostly an aesthetic thing for us. So if it looks like it needs to be trimmed back, trim it back. Gulf muley does really well being trimmed back. But then we get to sedges. Sedges are a little different. They are evergreen. They do not typically die back the same way that grasses do. You'll notice a lot of them are still green, even this time of year. So these ones, I typically will only cut back if they really need it. If they look like they're struggling, like right now, I think we've got some that are at, I think it's Pacific, that got frostburnt after this freeze. That's a situation where I would go ahead and trim them back just to allow that new growth to come in. But they don't typically need like annual trimming the same way that a grass does. Grasses, it's kind of like same cycle every year. The sedges are supposed to be evergreen, so we only cut them back when it's needed, if they're getting damaged or frostburnt. All right, perennials. We've recognized a lot of these. Okay, perennials are tricky because we have a lot of them and a lot of them need different things. So there are two categories. We have woody perennials and we have herbaceous perennials. And let's just start with herbaceous because they're easier. Those are the ones that are green, bendy, you know, it's kind of what we think of with a lot of plants. And those ones we cut back, pretty much all of them with a few exceptions. We're gonna cut these back this time of year and they just regrow from that rosette, right? Woody ones. So this is like your Salvia greggii, your flame acanthus. Any of those perennials, it's like it does flower, but you notice how some of them kind of have like a wood on them. They get hard like a stick. Those ones we treat a little differently. Oftentimes we don't cut those all the way back. Those ones, they're usually gonna be trimmed back only about 1/3 just to kind of help shape them and encourage new growth. But we don't need to cut them all the way back to the ground the same way that we do for herbaceous perennials. So I'll give some examples here in a minute, but the reason we don't do this on the woody ones, you can kind of, I tried to get a picture where you could see, those aren't dead. They don't die off in the winter time. Like if you scratch it, it will still be green even in January. And that means that new growth is gonna come out of that same stem. It's not all coming back out from the ground like a herbaceous perennial. It's gonna come back on the same woody stem. So you don't need to cut it all the way back. Just kind of shape it a little bit. I always say 1/3 just to kind of give it a little bit of shape and encourage new growth. But let's go over some examples. Okay. And guys, I'm just going to apologize. There's not a set rule. A lot of these, you just need to know the plant itself and know what it needs. But Salvia greggii, we have quite a few of these. I think we've got some at like Pacific. And I'm trying to think of where else we might have them. But they're a very common plant all throughout Dallas. They bloom really well. They're very easy, so we like using them. These ones are woody, and this is one that you don't cut all the way back. You don't need to cut it all the way back to the ground. We just do a little hair trim. So I say just trim it a little bit, but not cut back. Same thing with flame acanthus. Right now, I don't think we have any of these here, but it is another great plant that I could foresee us using here, so it's good to know. That one, again, just a little bit of a trim. And then just because he wants to be complicated, like a fall aster, that one is woody, but that one gets cut all the way back. So I know, I wish there was like a specific rule that applied to all of them, but we just need to look at the plants that we have in the parks and learn those individual plants and what they need. So then herbaceous perennials, this is that Rudbeckia, y'all are familiar with that, same thing, right? We cut that all the way back. Salvia farinaceae, this one is at Carpenter, I don't remember if we have it anywhere else, but I know we have it at Carpenter and Gora. These ones get cut back to the rosette down at the bottom. So they get cut all the way back to the ground, except for that little bit of green that they still hang on to. And then we have exceptions, because why make it easy? Okay, the one I'm gonna highlight, Artemisia, because I know we have this one here. This one is weird and it's an evergreen. So this one actually does not need to be cut back. This one can stay year round. It will stay the same color. If it gets any little dead pieces in it, we can start to trim those back. But overall, this is usually in, like when designers put this in, they're putting it in because it's evergreen and because it'll have something there in the winter. So this one does not need to be trimmed back. I know we have trimmed the ones back in hardwood already, and so I just wanted to address that. In the future, we don't need to be cutting these ones back. And then columbine, that's another fun one. It looks like an herbaceous little perennial that you would cut back, and for whatever reason, it is evergreen and does not need that. So I just want to highlight, it's really important to learn the specific plants. For today, if you remember anything, Artemisia. We don't need to cut the Artemisia back. Okay, shrubs. And this is where we're going to really be focusing most of our efforts on today, is the shrubs. So these are all shrubs that we have in the parks. This is Texas sage, this is wax myrtle, and this is bridal spirea. Okay, so hedging versus hand pruning. Hedging is what we are oftentimes very used to. It's what most of us were trained to do, was to use a hedger and kind of just make it a bit of a box or a straight wall. And there are times where that is totally appropriate, and that's what you need to do. For what we are doing today, we are going to be focusing on hand pruning. So with these, hedging works best if the plant does not get flowers and it is evergreen all the time. So if it meets both of those criteria, it's probably okay to be hedged. So no flowers, evergreen. Honestly, there's not a lot of them. There's only a few. Hand pruning, that is going to be for any deciduous shrub, so anything that loses its leaves in the winter, and evergreen flowering or berrying shrubs. So if it gets a flower, if it gets a berry, we need to be using hand pruners. We only need to do it a couple times a year, which is really nice. Otherwise, it can be left alone, but 1 to 2 times a year. It's going to take longer, but you don't have to do it as often. And this is where it's important to know the plant, because plants bloom at different times, right? Like sometimes you get shrubs that bloom in spring, sometimes you get them blooming in fall. And obviously what you don't want to do is accidentally come in and trim off all the flowers right before they bloom. That would kind of defeat the purpose, right? So we've got some examples I'm going to show you here today. Like we're going to be going to Carpenter to trim the Texas sage. That one's all fine. But what we're not going to do is trim the bridal spirea that's right out here, because we'll go see it. It's right about to bloom. So that's not a good time to trim a shrub when it's right about to bloom. Let it flower, and then whenever it's done, then you come back in and trim it. And then, yeah, really we only are looking to do this to adjust for the size. So just really be thinking about what the goal of trimming is, right? If it doesn't need to be trimmed, don't trim it. You don't need to. So it doesn't need, most of these parks, we're not looking for things to look like a perfect box. We're looking for it to have more of that natural shape. So the only reason we're going to be trimming is because maybe we need to maintain a sight line. So we need to bring the overall height of the plant down. That's common. Or maybe it's going really crazy over into the sidewalk or something, so we need to trim it then. But otherwise, it's not something that needs to be done on a weekly or monthly basis usually. So just do it selectively, use your best judgment. Okay, we're gonna focus on Texas sage. This is what we're doing today. These are happy Texas sages. They do get these blooms on them, but they don't have a specific bloom time because they're complicated plants. They bloom whenever they feel like it. I don't know why. There's no telling when they're gonna bloom. Some people say that they bloom right before it rains because they sense moisture in the air, and so they will bloom before it rains. Native Americans use that to predict rain, but it's not perfect. So don't worry about the bloom time on a Texas sage. But I wanted y'all to note the shape of these. You see, we're not working with boxes or, a perfect ball. This is their natural shape. This is what they prefer to look like. So just bear that in mind. This is what we're trying to replicate and keep when we go in and trim. So we're going to keep the same shape. We just want it to be a little bit smaller, but try to maintain that same shape. So yeah, these are happy Texas sages. These are not happy Texas sages. Okay, so this is what we do. If you're using a hedger, this is oftentimes what that ends up looking like. So this is what it'll start out looking like, but then if you do it for too long, this is what happens. They get all this dead down to the bottom, and over time, this plant will die. So if we continue to do hedging on plants like this, they will over time, unfortunately, die. So that's why we don't want to do that. This one I took over by my house because I watched people come in with a hedger and hedge off the tops of them every month. And this is what they end up looking like. So they're not happy. So text stage, what we're focusing on. The other ones that are on that same hedge that y'all are probably familiar with is the dwarf wax myrtle. Same thing. This is the natural shape of a dwarf wax myrtle. So we're going to try to maintain that. And then this is the abelia. So this is a grandiflora. I believe those are the same ones that we've got over in the park. And so, yeah, it's just good to know what the plant is supposed to look like so that we can maintain that, right? It's good to keep in mind what the shape is supposed to look like, and then we replicate. We just need to be selective in how we do that hand pruning. Okay, these are a couple more that we have. So the bridal spirea, we've got some of these out here. Super pretty. They're about to bloom right now. And they get these kind of wild arms, and that's okay. You know, that's just kind of how they grow, and that's fine as long as we don't have like crazy ones just like going straight up or anything. But if they're in that general shape, then they're good to go. Coralberry, I believe we also have some of these out here. And this one is a deciduous shrub, but it does get these berries in the fall. So we want to make sure we're not accidentally pruning those off. And then the other one I just want to end on is the oak leaf hydrangea, because we have those at Pacific. Yep, Pacific. And these ones are deciduous, right? Like they lose their leaves in the winter, but they do not need to actually be trimmed back. They do best if you just leave them alone and do not trim them at all. If they need a little bit of trimming for whatever reason, you can do it really selectively, but overall, these guys don't need to be touched. So they will lose their leaves. They will look like giant sticks coming out of the ground for a little while, but you know, they're actually happy as can be. So those are good to be left alone. And that does differ, I was just gonna say real quick, from the rest of hydrangeas. I don't think we have any other hydrangeas in the parks, but just know the oak leaf hydrangea is kind of in its own category where you don't have to touch them.
If any plants have, let's say, disease or anything, and use pruners to clean them?
Yeah.
What's the best way to clean the pruners, or does it matter?
Ooh, honestly, I carry Clorox wipes with me. Like I've got Clorox wipes and that I just carry, and that's how I do that. It's the same thing with if you've got like roses or anything that have that disease, that rosette virus. I just clean off the tools after I use it. But for me, I've always used Clorox wipes, and that's been fine. But yeah, anything else? All right, cool.